than what exists already, which will inevitably provide an opportunity for the creation of, these micro autonomous energy, areas, because they can tie into this new infrastructure and contribute energy to it, but also, have the autonomy and the ability to create energy for themselves. So it's a self-perpetuating loop of energy, I guess, is what I'm trying to describe here.
Right. Okay. And the Department of Energy programs that you mentioned, the microgrids, in terms of this group, are there grant opportunities, different funding opportunities that you're seeing that are coming out now that, should that even be a potential recommendation in terms of our menu of option items that, look at and explore the current DOE grants?
Yeah, yes, absolutely. There are some pretty significant DOE grants that are coming down the line. And there's some work being done already. The Nature Conservancy, for example, has semi-partnered with the EPA, and they are looking at using abandoned mine lands to create energy grids rather than disturbing, what we would call wildscape, right? So instead of digging up the desert, they're looking at places that have already been modified and changed for industrial purposes. So the Nature Conservancy is also another resource, I think, that would be worth our time to look into.
Okay. And is most of that solar applications or other applications as well?
All applications that either decrease or have a net zero carbon footprint. So, anything that I think the big capital S sustainability covers, right? In terms of clean energy, including hydroelectric power.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Any other input or thoughts on the energy?
Yeah, Chris,
Yeah.
Mark here.
Yep, go ahead, Mark.
I think NV Energy is a key to the energy efficiency side for sure, with rebates, et cetera. And even the state energy partner has been talking about some of that as well. And I think legislative is the other key, is to make sure that our legislators know, or discussions with them so that they can put some things forward as well. The electrification is really taken off in Nevada. Yesterday I spoke with the Electrification Coalition, which is going to have a one-day conference on March 31st in Las Vegas. The majority of that is e-vehicles, but I think just getting the word out to folks about what's going on, and I didn't know these guys were around and supporting Nevada, but they support other states as well. Nevada, they said, is in the top 5 for electrification projects. So continuing to get the word out and maybe using folks like that as another avenue.
And that was, could you repeat the name of the group again, Mark?
Yeah, Electrification Coalition.
Okay, thanks.
And I have a Teams meeting set up with them on Thursday, since we are moving forward with 2 electric buses for the school district. I was going to be part of a panel that they're going to have on public entities, Clark County, Washoe County, City Fair, those kind of folks, just on e-buses. So that'd be interesting.
Definitely. Is that the group Tom Polakalis is involved in?
No, I think he's involved with a different group.
Okay.
And I was trying to see his name, you know, on some of the documents, because I thought, oh, Tom's got to be involved with this, but maybe in some way he is, but I didn't see his name associated with it. But I actually watched their 2020 conference. They have it on their website. Yesterday I had it on, and the state climatologist, is it Dr. Everett?
Yeah.
Kristen, yeah, she was a moderator with Dave Bobzine and some folks from actually some folks from NDEP and NDOT talking about the highways, et cetera, and some of the plans they had. So.
All right. Well, that's good. That's good to know. Yeah, and you know, Mark, you brought up the idea of making sure that legislators know about some of these issues and can put things forward. Are there specific thoughts that you have in terms of legislative action that the group should, you know, be suggesting or recommending in terms of, you know, as we possibly feed things into the policy and funding group? Are there, you know, policy changes, funding changes, legislative changes that you see as ones that would be key here? And that's an open question for everybody, but I started with you, Mark.
Yeah, I don't have anything in particular, you know, but I do think they ought to know about this group and what folks are trying to do. I think they'd be really interested in that. You know, since we're citizens as well, but we're concerned citizens that are in this industry, if you will. But so just communicating with them on what our ideas are and how they could help.
Yeah, and to provide a little bit more information about that, Mark, we've had some development in that area. So we've been reaching out, or they've been hearing about us just through the woodwork. So Assemblyman Watts has shown interest, and then Assemblywoman Sarah Peters. So they're aware of what's going on. They're going to sit in on a couple of meetings, kind of hear moving on in the future. So they're starting to see what this group is doing. So they're aware that some proposals may come through as well.
And this is Alexia. I can add a little bit more color to that too. The next policy and funding, or not the next one, the April 5 policy and funding working group, we are doing a presentation for the group to discuss sort of the policy needs for lithium ion battery recycling. Because if we're looking at, you know, electrification as one of the main sources of clean energy for Nevada, then we have to understand what's going on in the background, you know, as potential barriers to prevent us from reaching those electrification goals. And we found in our policy and funding working group that, you know, there's a large collection of really intelligent people, but we don't all know all of the things. So we need to bring some experts in and give us more information. And, you know, so I think speaking to that, of course, everyone in this group is invited to join. Tina and Susan, you know, extended the invitation. You're all invited to join that meeting on April 5th at 2 p.m. To hear the presentation about the policy needs for lithium ion battery recycling, which ties into, you know, mining. I think mining's great. I'm a miner, but not everybody agrees. And, you know, in order to continue accelerating and expanding, you know, efficient electric energy, we're going to have to mine the lithium and cobalt and nickel and other things out of the earth. But we can really do that in a much more caring and careful way if we are able to recycle these materials as well. So something to consider in this conversation, I think.
Definitely. Thanks. What other thoughts do folks have?
So you have at the second bullet, Chris, going into the different energy usage by user. Do you want to outline or define what clean energy means to in pertinent to this objective? Just an idea, because you've been mentioning the Electrification Coalition, NV Energy. I think if you also create like a solar, or you talk about the lithium ions, that just may help kind of organization down the road. Again, just a thought as I was listening.
That's a good idea, and I think you can add biofuel to that mix as well. And hydrogen, there's a hydrogen fuel station in Truckee.
Yeah.
I was also, as Lakshmi, reading the newer designs in wind energy technologies are probably a lot more compared to, let's say, solar panel, and then all the issues around recycling them. It's better in terms of environmental impact. The newer designs in wind technologies, wind energy technologies. So maybe something that could be looked at and maybe given more, incentives or whatever.
And is it too much of a stretch to add like kinetic energy? And I say that in terms of not just, perpetual motion pieces, like some of the art, structures that you see in Reno or Las Vegas that are really pretty, and some of those actually create their own tiny little amounts of energy, but also kinetic energy in the form of like walking or riding a bicycle, right? I don't know if that's in the scope of what we're trying to identify here, but that's efficient, clean energy. Like get out of your car and ride your bike instead.
Right.
I don't know. Ride a horse.
I'm wondering, would that, it's great. I didn't really think about that. Would that be more of like a greenhouse gas reduction type, or because if you're going to reduce emissions, because unless you're going to be utilizing people walking to generate energy, that I think that's how I would make the tie in my mind, at least.
That's a good point. I think that's a good point.
Well,
I really like it. Or you see like the bikes where they, as you turn it, blends and blender to make smoothies, like on the beach.
Yeah, I work out, I walk on a treadmill, and I'm like, I could charge my phone right now while I'm doing this. Why can't I do that?
Right. Yep. Yeah. And I think that there's a lot of obvious overlap between talking about energy and talking about climate issues. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And yeah, I obviously you could get, if you wanted to get into the weeds, you could get down to, are there proposals for RTCs and bike lanes and different things to help encourage the use of bikes? I guess in terms of trying to come up with specific tactics or action items for our particular objective here, is it in terms of tactics, I guess I'm just wondering, identifying, is it bringing people together to, bringing, like in that first bullet, is it bringing industry, making the suggestion that there should be like a new working group or a new stakeholders group created for people in the industry to get together and, kind of create that forum for them to be able to talk and bring up what their challenges are in Nevada and what specific either regulatory or financial incentives might make sense to help them move the industry forward. I'm just trying to think how we frame it so that it can be a tactic or an action item under this specific objective.
Alexia, again, I am always definitely in favor of coalition building. And I think in some cases, there's a lot of really new, very innovative technology that's, unrolling, or that's rolling out, in Nevada. And so because of that, there's a lot of protection and competition as well among, companies. And so maybe a neutral party creating a space where we're not talking about intellectual property or proprietary, property or anything like that. And we're just talking about higher level stuff. That's probably a great idea, because who doesn't want their voice to be heard? Who doesn't want to have, a stake in the game that could potentially make or break their business? I think that's, creating space for these innovative companies to be heard and to be recognized is a great idea.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Lakshmi.
Sorry, I was wondering, the education team is working on the revamping the Recycle Nevada page. Could there be a page there for people to, companies that are dealing with, any kind of green technology or trying to promote barriers they face? They can come and, provide feedback, and that can be used for this purpose.
Yeah, I think it's an idea to consider. I'm not sure. I guess my question would be, do you think that people in the energy industry would go to the recycling page to find or share information? I could see where they would go, like we get an increasing number of questions about how do I recycle old solar panels? So I could see them going for that kind of specific question that's around the management of that waste stream. But do you think that they would go just in general for other types of issues to that particular page?
I thought it was going to be renamed sustainability website.
Okay.
Yeah, it's more overarching thing, right, Kayla?
Correct. Yes. So we're taking Nevada Recycles and turning it into Sustainable Nevada, or some, different name, to encompass all sustainability topics and not just recycling.
Okay.
And on Chris, to that end, one of the things that were brought up in there was also like showcasing companies that are doing things right. So, basically trying to really make that page way more useful and more like even an advertisement form, right? So, I would think that, they might be interested in providing feedback through it.
And I think that goes to, sorry. I think that also pairs with Alexia's comment of creating the coalitions, this increase in that communication. So I think, Chris, to get back to your how do we create an actionable strategy title, I think that's, I'm hearing people are centralizing around the increasing communication between the different entities.
Right.
Yeah, ultimately, I don't know if there's some kind of language or if this is even what we can do, but like something like, Partners for Sustainable Nevada, the bridge between the innovators and the policymakers. I don't know. Something to that effect is what I'm thinking. Like
a slogan?
Yeah, it doesn't have to be a slogan. And I think I'm being a little silly today, but yeah, like how can we be the middleman that connects the pieces because the innovators need support from the state and from the local governments, and the innovators need financial assistance in some ways, especially when we're creating new technology. So creating a place where those things can be met, where those things can meet, would be fantastic.
And that's just right, Alexia. That's why we created this group, because we noticed that essentially lack of middlemen and lack of communication, where it wasn't supporting the innovators to get to eventually what they need to succeed within Nevada. So anything you think is gonna be helpful to kind of play that middleman coordinator piece, that's why we're all here, and I think we're doing a pretty good job.
Yeah, I love that tagline that Alexa said, coalition building, creating a space for innovative technologies. I think that's awesome, and that'd be really helpful for a lot of folks if they saw that at the website.
Perfect. I'm recording this meeting, so I've taken a note for the minute. We'll get the wording and pass that along to the education and outreach group when we start redesigning that website.
Yeah, great ideas. And then back to the bullets that we have there, I guess I'm wondering in terms of, again, our sort of actionable items, in terms of the second bullet and the different sectors and their use of energy, their needs, what incentives or policy and regulatory changes might make sense to help them. Again, does it make sense to have our proposal be, create different stakeholder groups, or do they already exist to get that kind of input about, what government and public entities need, what business and industry needs, what private consumers need, and obviously all of that kind of feeds into the NV Energy programs that support energy efficiency and clean energy. But there are also, cooperatives around the state. There's other, there are other things. Maybe there are things that the Governor's Office of Energy is doing, in terms of stakeholder groups. But I'm just thinking in terms of what we could recommend would that be a logical next step to sort of create, again, that kind of forum for people to be able to talk about, hey, we've already done this with energy efficiency like you, Mark, but we need this help to go forward with more, or, I don't know, what do people think in terms of what we could propose as a recommendation or an action item out of this? Go ahead, Alexia.
I think, trying to keep it in context, we're building a website here, creating a page with access to the people of interest in all of the levels that are required. In other words, maybe it's difficult to bring a working groups together for all of the stakeholders, which I still think we should do, but maybe we also bring sort of a coalition of policymakers and funders together, and do that in creating an access point to them in the form of a web page where you've got the contact information and the person's name and their office and their affiliation, one-stop shop kind of idea.
Just to add to that, it would be great if there was somebody from the government, the policymakers, or somebody who would actually kind of look at and respond, and that way it would look like the voices are being heard. I don't know how to get anybody to sign up for it, but
that would be great, Lakshmi. Maybe we can ask the governor to create a new office of, you know, like the innovation, the Office of Innovation in Nevada.
Yay.
Yeah.
The governor's
Well-
office did reach out after the midterm meeting in January, so they're aware now that this group is moving forward. So its name's slowly getting out there. Eventually we'll make our way up to the top.
It is an election year, and I think that we all should take completely full advantage of that.
Good point.
Right.
Yeah.
Were you going to say something, Lakshmi?
No. Sorry.
Well, and I think some of the innovator stuff can also tie in with, you know, what's already going on with the governor's office of economic development and some of the sectors that they're focused in on. And, you know, maybe it's a recommendation that we could bring to them to, you know, in terms of maybe expanding the sectors that they're focused in on. I think natural resources is still one of the areas, but maybe we can have a specific subset within that around clean energy if it's not already high on their radar.
I think this is Lexi again. It's definitely high on their radar. Just, you know, the numbers that are coming out, you know, the statistics for the United States. And of course, you know, statistics will tell you anything you want them to, but Nevada is one of 5 states in the country that's sort of, you know, earmarked for the greatest potential for the largest, you know, variety of energy creation for the entire country. So there's, you know, and I think when people see, you know, statistics like that, and when they read reports like that, everybody just sees money signs, right? If Nevada's got a check mark on it, like it's number 2, it's California and then Nevada, then everybody's looking in our direction and they want to put money in this state. So, you know, another way of thinking about that too is, do we just want this like free-for-all energy innovation creation zone where everything and anything goes, or do we need like controlled measured pace? Do we need to define, you know, as Nevadans, what we want to live with? Do we really want windmills like on every street corner? I don't know, I'm making it up, but just to kind of turn the tables a little bit, money will be coming in, but there needs to be some kind of, you know, measured pace, I believe personally. And so there might be a working group, for example, that looks at that, or there might be a page on the website that poses this thought and looks for, you know, comments from Nevadans at large. I know that's kind of high level, but I think it's worth thinking about.
Right. Well, yeah, I mean, a couple of thoughts come to mind there. I mean, one, you know, just in terms of Nevada being in that position, that's probably something that not everybody is aware of. And so it's kind of an educational component, and that could be part of what's on the website. But then also, you know, the other part is that actual, you know, transition to the alternative clean energy technologies and the kind of companies that come in, and that economic development piece, and taking a look at that. And, you know, yeah, and maybe the PSN can create that sort of forum for sharing ideas and thoughts about that, and kind of feeding information to policymakers.
Precisely.
All right. Any other thoughts on this? And so just, I guess, to back up a little bit, you know, we'll be kind of working on these notes here and trying to reword to make it more of action items that can be part of the menu of options. But in terms of, and then we'll send that out to everybody to take a look at, and just ask that you take a look at it, over this coming week, and get any feedback in as soon as you can, and we will incorporate that so that we can kind of keep moving forward with the idea of trying to have a menu of options document that can be published towards the end of the month. So, certainly don't feel like if you forget something on this call, you'll have another opportunity to get your voice heard and get that idea in. And like I said, we'll reword these things and see what kind of input you have on the final recommendations, the final draft ones, and kind of move from there. But before we get to that stage, I just want to ask if there's any more that folks have that they want to share in terms of what we should think about under the energy objective.
This is Lexi again. I think we mentioned this yesterday, but just the idea of pathways to power, right? The people that need access to these efficient, forms of energy the most are the people who are the least capable of accessing it. So, I think that was mentioned yesterday. I don't want to be redundant, but just in case, I think that should definitely be captured here.
Yeah, that's a great point. And you're right. And I think one of those things that we were hoping to drive out of the objective, talking about environmental justice and equity, is just, let's have this be a guiding principle that in terms of whether it's energy, whether it's climate policy, whether it's, new regulation, whatever it is that we want equity and inclusion to be factored in and be sort of a guiding principle throughout. So that's a really great reminder. All right, anything else? Noah, I see you joined. Do you have anything that you wanted to add?
I've mostly just been listening in on the conversation. It sounds like we've been talking quite a bit about, just expanding the pathways of communication so that we can, from what I've gleaned, really opening up the ability for us to push some of these things forward. I'm wondering, did we in here, I don't know if I missed it, identify anything specific that we are doing really well in this category?
Yeah, that's a good question.
And Sarah, going along with that, kind of identify the baseline of where these different industries are at. Just really collecting that data and getting it to a single universal location or source.
And on a slightly different note, and this was mentioned earlier, but we're looking at greenhouse gas emissions. Do we have like a separate category for that? I can't recall.
Yeah, so that objective discussion is coming up here in 20 minutes.
Okay, perfect. Never mind, I'll hold. Yeah, I think you're right. I think capturing a baseline here, right? Because if we're developing a website and pages, of course, we want to be as educational as possible. And so having, even if it's not the most accurate baseline, which is an unfortunate thing to say, but we don't really know how to measure all of these things specifically. But just having some kind of baseline, at least that works for this group, that we can say, as Partners for Sustainable Nevada, this is where we think we're, launching from this point and going forward. But I think establishing a baseline here for that is good as well. And in order to do that, I think we've captured it, but we're looking at single family and multifamily structures. We're looking at business and industry. We're looking at transportation. So maybe we need to capture, what are the different forms or needs for energy, right? So there's habitation, transportation, industry, and that at least will inform us going forward how we might want to categorize these topics in terms of energy and how we can find a baseline for them.
That's a great point. And it also kind of reminds me of the fact that, the state does have legislated goals for renewable energy and for, I don't know if there's anything anymore for energy efficiency, but, we could also kind of like the recycling goal that the state has, and there's always measuring against the goal in terms of where we're at now and what the goal is. So, maybe that's something that we could kind of tie in with the baselining, is just saying, okay, well, here's where we are now, and also here's where the goals are. How are we doing towards those goals? And kind of just even from a educational standpoint, have that on the website, just a little ticker, a tracker kind of thing that people could always check in and look at.
That's a great idea.
And Lakshmi, I think you had your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I don't know if anybody on here on this team is from NV Energy, but I wanted to see what kind of roadmap they already have, and if we, if this forum can somehow help them with any of the green energy initiatives they already have. And they might tap into them for data from residential, multi-family units and industrial. So
definitely, yeah. I think engaging NV Energy is a great idea, and also probably the association that represents the rural electric co-ops that are out there that serve in the areas of the state not covered by NV Energy.
And weird question. I think it's Article 14 of the Constitution of Nevada that grants exclusivity to NV Energy. I may be mistaken, but is that something that we want to look at in terms of, opening the doors to innovative, clean, efficient energy? Is that something we don't want to touch with a 10-foot pole?
Well, I think it's a legitimate question. I think that probably in terms of the PSN tackling that as an issue right now is probably a little bit early, but maybe if we encourage the creation of stakeholder groups from industry as well as, excuse me, as well as industry users, or just electricity users and gas users, maybe that's where those ideas come out of those stakeholder groups.
Yeah, it's a hard topic, and I think it's definitely been through legislation quite a few times over, I don't know, since like the 1960s, and it still holds, which is fine. And I don't have a stake in the game on one side or the other, but it's definitely a question that I think should be revisited, since we're looking at pretty much changing, or our access to different types of energy is changing. Maybe we're not changing it, but as things are changing so significantly, maybe we should rethink some old rules.
Right. No, good point. And it also points to the fact that we've talked about NV Energy, and I'm in the north where I get my gas from NV Energy as well. But, Southwest Gas is also out there and a player in the energy space. And so we should probably try to engage them as well.
Right. And one other, I might be trailing off topic here, but, looking at the energy use in the state of Nevada, NV Energy is still using a certain percent of coal power, I think, down in Clark County. They're still getting some of their electricity from coal. And I believe the majority of the gas that we use in the state of Nevada is imported from other states. And so it's incredibly expensive. I'm sure anybody who uses, propane knows for sure. I don't know how much natural gas is going for right now, but those might be some educational points to put up on the website. I don't know if that should even be its own page, but like how are these different forms of energy created in our state, or how are they brought to our state, or of the energy that we create in our state, how much of it is sent out of state?
Right. A lot of the dollars go out of state.
Yes. So there's some money conservation that could be had there. Sorry, it's off topic.
Money efficiency.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, well, I appreciate it. There's a lot of great ideas here, and I know I haven't been keeping up with all the notes on the shared screen, but I've been writing them down. So anyway, I'll transition some of those over, and we'll be rounding up with Kayla and Bree after this just to get the notes out. But like I said, just be on the lookout for an email with a draft, and consider it a draft. It's your opportunity to provide input and additional thoughts. Any other burning energy issues that anybody wants to bring up for this group before we close?
Do you have geothermal in there?
Yeah, it kind of needs to be in that whole mix there.
I'm sure you'll think of others down the road as well. It's like there's a lot of them, but that would just
absolutely.
right now.
Yep. Okay. Well, I think there were a lot of great ideas in this meeting. So thank you everybody for joining and sharing your ideas, and look forward to hearing more from you as we get the drafts out, and then keep an eye on everything as we move forward. So, and as Kayla said, if you want to get on at 10 o'clock, we'll be having the climate strategies call, and that'll be our last. We had 3 calls yesterday of our subgroups for this sustainability working group. We've got the 2 this morning, and then we'll be sending out and sharing the notes with everybody. So thank you for your time this morning. And if you want to join in on the next call, is it the same number, Kayla?
Yeah,
Okay.
same number. You can just stay on the line.
All right. So if you want to be on the next call at 10, you don't even have to hang up. You can just walk away and come back at 10.
Perfect. We'll see you at 10.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks so
everyone.
much.
See ya. I see that people are still popping on, so we'll just wait another minute or two, and then we'll get started. Just giving it a second for Noah, our co-chair, to get back on. All right, well, let's go ahead and get started. So thanks everybody for getting on this call. If you might have been on a few calls yesterday and today, we've been trying to get our different subgroup calls all completed just to go through the 5 objectives, and this is our last call. So thanks everybody for getting on this morning, and appreciate your input on this. The Sustainability Working Group's climate objective. So I'm going to just share my screen, and because I have a question that I want to start off with, and I just want to apologize for being a little confused. For me, I had a couple of different iterations of the objective that I saw, and so I just wanted to bring it up and see what people think, and I think that'll help, sort of frame the basis of the discussion this morning. So I just wanted to start there. And so I know there was one objective that I had seen back at our January working group meeting, that was the objective was going to be a little bit more action oriented, reduce greenhouse gas emissions in Nevada by helping advance and promote the Nevada 2020 climate strategy. Then, like I said, I apologize for any confusion on the different iterations, but I think on the January 19th full stakeholders meeting, it was increase the communication and education surrounding the climate change action work being done in Nevada. So a little bit more communications and education focused. So I just wanted to throw it out to the group as we launch into the discussions in terms of, which direction do you want to go with the objective, and open up the conversation.
Hey, Chris, it's Marco. I guess my opinion on this is that the having a little bit more of direct action, out of the state to help with some of these efforts makes a lot of sense, especially if you consider it in light or in parallel or in concert with the Nevada Climate Initiative. So in whatever ways, state agencies can do things to accomplish the overarching goals of the climate initiative to reduce greenhouse gas emissions or mitigate them, I think it makes a lot of sense. And if that means directing directing resources directly for the things that are listed in the, as far as like the transportation sector goes, or for, emissions from waste or emissions from, the building sector, anything that can be done to help effectuate that makes sense. That's just how I kind of see it.
Okay, thanks. I appreciate the input. Any other thoughts or opinions on this?
This is Alexia. I am actually actively participating right now with the EPA at the federal level, and they are looking at revising their GHG modeling as it pertains to renewable fuel sources, and they're either going to readopt their existing pathways and or create new pathways for renewable fuel sources based on the greenhouse gas emissions and the life cycles of the greenhouse gas emissions. So in terms of the Nevada Climate Action or Climate Initiative, which has some greenhouse gas emission modeling already for both housing industry and transportation, I think it would be really beneficial to include some of the federal modeling as well, and maybe to have a clearer understanding what that modeling actually is looking at, right?
Yep, definitely. Any other thoughts on the objective? Okay.
Another thought on both of the objectives, probably the first one, but it applies to both, is we're talking about NDEP. We're also talking about the state government, but we haven't really factored in, the Forest Service, for example, or USDA, who manage a large portion of the lands in Nevada, as well as the BLM. And a lot of the greenhouse gas emissions, that are modeled and that we can account for are directly related to like pasture lands for grazing and agricultural needs as well. And so it might be worth our time to reach out to some of those other agencies and look at greenhouse gas emissions from their perspective as well.
Okay. All right. I mean, in some ways, I'm hearing a little bit of almost like a combination of the two. I mean, what you're talking about, Alexia, is really about communications and, expanding that. But I think also, as we think about different strategies, transportation sector, housing industry, where the big emissions are and strategies for the state, I guess it's really still a little bit of a matter between, how much do we want to be more educational focused versus coming up with specific ideas or recommendations. But I guess let's kind of move forward with the idea that maybe we'll combine the two statements that are there right now a little bit. And then in terms of ideas regarding specific action items or tactics for the menu of options under this objective, what's on there now really came from our January call and some of the ideas that were put forward then, and obviously transportation, that as a sector is the largest source of our greenhouse gas emissions in the state right now. So it makes sense that that's there. I guess I'd open up the conversation now to just ideas that people have and thoughts in terms of, kind of wording our tactics and action items and what we could propose for the Partnership for a Sustainable Nevada.
Could we propose like renewable identification numbers for industry that, if they meet certain criteria, are given some type of credit or some type of value toward their greenhouse gas emissions reductions, or, like neutral or net zero, carbon emissions or something? Would that be something that we could look at in terms of, Partners for Sustainable Nevada and creating a voice for creating value?
Yeah, I think so. And I guess I'll be a little repetitive of our last call. You know, maybe that's something that as a group today, we're not ready to stick in there as a recommendation necessarily, but maybe the recommendation is, again, creating a stakeholder group that can discuss, you know, especially an industry stakeholder group that can discuss options and incentives for what would help drive change, and, you know, be able to have that bubble up to the policy and funding group going forward, you know, different specific ideas.
You know, some of it, I'm trying to look through the climate initiative itself. I mean, I think some of it you kind of have to see what's in there and how you could maybe align with it. I mean, what's probably the most direct ways of aligning with the initiative's goals and targets, and then if there are like specific implementation strategies in there that are directly helping advance and promote, and maybe they don't have it like an owner, so to speak, those strategies, whatever they are the ones that you could, that this group could help advance or work on.
That's a really good point.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. What other thoughts do people have on this particular issue? I mean, obviously, there's a big interest. You know, we're kind of the catch-all when we're the sustainability working group, and when the different issues popped up, and we came up with our 5 objectives. You know, having the PSN involved in climate in the state was something that you know, it seemed to be attractive to the group. I know, you know, we've got fairly small participation on this call right now, but in terms of the broader group, it just seemed like this was an area that people wanted to have the PSN be taking a role in. And so I look for your thoughts and feedback on how we can define that and put it into a menu of options. I think it's a great idea, and, you know, maybe that immediately points to the need to put out a little bit more, or have us all as an assignment look at the climate action strategy and just think a little bit more about the specific goals and things that are in there, and come back. You know, we can do it either by another call or by emails, and just try to come up with, hey, what are the objectives? What are the goals that we want to try to plug into?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So on that note, you know, there, I'll read a few of these things off here, you know, that might be, you know, might be worth incorporating into this. So maybe the most direct one is, you know, there's climate mitigation, greenhouse gas reduction policies, and things that are specifically, you know, I think NDP oriented. It said, you know, it's kind of identified under the NDP policy catalog, and then policy analysis by different sectors. So transportation, electricity generation, industry, residential, commercial, and land use and change. So it kind of gets into different things that could be done in each area. The next section kind of gets into some of the monitoring, modeling, and managing. And I think there again, NDP has had, you know, in developing this and doing that report at the state level. I mean, there's obviously that direct role there. And then the last section gets into, you know, some of the economics and equity aspects. So things like environmental justice and climate justice, how how from like a governance standpoint, state entities can do intergovernmental and interagency coordination, as a direct advancement and promotion of the overall initiative. And again, from a partnership standpoint, I could see how that could maybe be used. But again, as far as like the specifics, I'd have to kind of open it back up and read through it again. But there are, there's like a policy menu for each of those different sectors,
Right.
that line right up with the objectives in there.
Well, and even though we're trying to have the menu of options document ready this month, I mean, there's nothing that says, oh, the doors are closed once this month is over. So maybe it also points, especially your comments, Marco. Maybe it points to the need to have somebody come in to our working group and just maybe give a high-level presentation. Maybe somebody who's actually been working on the plan, like Dr. Averett, or maybe a combination of somebody like her, and then also have somebody from NDEP that's kind of already working on developing sort of that policy catalog. You've got the Clean Cars Nevada initiative that already launched last year. You've got different things that NDEP is working on. Maybe having a presentation from those folks would help us sort of coalesce around where we could help.
Yeah, I'd agree. And perhaps also maybe a pointer or a direction as to, okay, here's the stuff that we haven't gotten to yet and might be a good fit for this group. Whatever those might be.
Yeah.
Or maybe at least a recommendation here. If you're looking for a spot to jump in on, here's our, here would be the recommendation for something to look at, because we're already doing these things, or NDOT's already doing these things, or NDF is already doing these things, that kind of thing.
Yeah, great ideas. I think that would be really helpful for us, just in terms of how we move forward. Like I said, obviously it's a strong interest, but I think trying to then take that interest and boil it down to actionable items and what we could do as the partnership, that's kind of our sticking point at the moment. And so I think probably this is one of those areas where having some people come in and present to us would be really useful.
I think too, if there are already so many, groups that are established working on greenhouse gas emissions. So rather than, take away, we could act as a support for them. But we could also act as a, sort of a mechanism to push them forward too, in a way, I'm trying to formulate this thought, like, maybe instead of us having our own agenda for how we think greenhouse gas emissions can be reduced or something, we can have an agenda about how can we support the people that are doing the work in this, in an actionable item for the website. How can you get involved, kind of thing.
Right.
So maybe we like maybe we like, summarize or categorize the different groups that are actively involved in the actual work, real quick little summaries of them, and then link to them, and maybe develop a relationship with them internally between the two groups. I'm sorry, didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, you're fine. I interrupted you. That's the hard part, I think, with the virtual world.
Mm-hmm.
Well, no, so I was thinking back to your two objectives you have here is, since this is such a, relative, it's not a new concept by any means, but it's new in this communication side where there's, we have the climate initiative, there's other bureaus within our agency who are working on different components. So I think really that increasing the communication and education around what work is being done is a wonderful, great start. And then you can start using like the reduced greenhouse gases and start having those actionable items more as your strategy when we have a better idea about what's actually going on and what needs to happen. I think just my thought, think about strategy over the next couple of years with how we should structure this now and what it can turn into.
I think too, if we're positioning, PSN to be, again, that bridge between, the stakeholders and the policymakers, if you will, then we stand in a really good place to be able to communicate, in both directions that way, where, and please forgive me, I don't mean to insult anyone, but state agencies and federal agencies kind of suck at communicating to like the vast majority of people. So maybe this is one of those areas that we can, look at being really, really good at communicating and connecting people. Right.
Yeah, and I think to touch on that, Alexia, is we've had several other bureaus and agencies just reach out with an update on how this communication model has been working, because there is a real lack of communication between state agencies and stakeholders, and it's very confusing for stakeholders to go about the right process to achieve whatever they're looking at. So I wholeheartedly hear that that comment numerous times, and we're always looking to see how we can improve that. So if this model's working, great. If it's not, let's review it and see how we can improve it. But thank you for that comment. I genuinely appreciate the honesty.
Yeah, I'm good at that. No problem.
Yeah, and I definitely agree that there's a gap in the communication right now and sort of the education. But I think the other piece of it is that that plan is already there, and so to wait too long, you could kind of miss the boat. So at the same time, it seems like I really like Marco's comment about asking these folks who are involved, where are you already making progress? Where is there not progress? Where could we help and try to, if we're going to do action, get in there, kind of get that feedback.
Yeah. Agreed.
And I guess someone like you, Sam, could maybe help answer also when there are sort of local county and city level sustainability and climate action plans, is the communication there between what you're doing compared to what the state is doing, and does that need to improve at all?
From my perspective, I think we're doing a really good job at communicating, especially as it relates to greenhouse gas and our greenhouse gas pathways. So we have our consultant kind of working on some analyses of, the different pathways that we have to get to our goals, and, fitting that in within, the state level type planning that they have there is a big priority of ours. And actually we have a meeting later today, I think, about that. And then, of course, on our advisory group, we've invited as many people from the state as we can. So I think we're doing our best there. And personally, I'm not sure where the gaps exist. I know that they do. I just don't know what those are.
Okay.
And I was just thinking about it right before you brought this up, and it's way off base, but it keeps jumping into my head. So the objective number 2, where it says increase the communication and education surrounding the climate change action work, I was thinking it should be climate action work. And the reason I think that is because coming at it, I'm assuming from both an adaptation and mitigation side. So the climate change action to me is more focused on the mitigation side, but if you're talking about climate action, it also responds to like that adaptability and resiliency component. But if somebody disagrees with me strongly, I'm not offended. I just was thinking like maybe leaving change out would keep it a little bit more broad.
I agree.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I kind of think based on the discussion so far, we might try to meld these two into one.
Is there, you know, as an action item, and I'm really just, you know, grasping here. I think that Clark County and Washoe County, you know, they're big. There are two big cities, and they've got a pretty good handle on, you know, being effective and thinking about these things. But, and I don't know this to be fact, so I'm making an assumption, but I am assuming that the rest of the counties in the state of Nevada, that is all 15 of the other ones, probably maybe aren't even having a conversation about this. So, and I can speak for my county specifically and say for a fact that no, there's no conversation about that. To adopt, and here are some things that you can do to implement, you know, good climate action, at least to get the conversation started. Again, I'm grasping.
And you know, I'm sharing my screen. I'm typing in some notes, but I'm also writing down some notes. So I'm doing a little bit of both. So it's not all popping up on the shared screen, but I am capturing what's being said. And, you know, I guess just if you haven't been on any of these calls yet, what we're going to do is we're going to take, you know, our notes, and we're going to try to turn some of this, the just sort of notes that are on there into the suggested action items, send out a draft for everybody to take a look at, and, you know, get your feedback on the draft ideas, as well as if you forget to bring anything up this morning, you can add your new ideas to the documentation. But, you know, because we are going to be still shooting for that end of the month to have the final document ready for the menu of options for PSN, you know, we'll be looking for your feedback, you know, in the short order, you know, this week, early next week. So that's just kind of the process in terms of just discussing a little bit more, you know, what we want to have here as potential action items or tactics for the menu of options. What other thoughts do folks have?
So going to the transportation sector, we don't have anything about infrastructure there. And I don't know what we are able to provide, but even if it's just a place where people can find charging stations, or, you know, learn about the different types of chargers that are available, or, you know, something like that.
Okay.
Another topic in greenhouse gas emissions that, you know, I think it's definitely covered in land use and industry, but I think might be worthwhile kind of singling out, and in land use specifically, but, you know, soil management, especially in Nevada, and especially as it pertains to water. And I think that it's important to maybe single that topic out in the greenhouse gas emissions conversation, because it's not something that I think is easily arrived at in thinking of greenhouse gas emissions. People think of, like, you know, smokestacks and mufflers on cars. But because we do have so much, you know, open, expansive public land in Nevada, and water is a critical issue for us in Nevada, they are directly related to greenhouse gas emissions.
So I don't disagree. How would you structure a potential tactic around that?
You know, that's what I've been kind of chewing on it. And like I said, I know we've got land use and I know we've got industry, but I don't know, maybe pulling out, you know, open space as its own sort of subcategory under land use, and just kind of refining that a little bit. I don't know if that's too granular, but we definitely have a different, we use the land in this state differently than most of the other states in the country do, because we have so much, you know, just open, undeveloped land. Yeah.
Okay.
Something to think about.
All right, let's see, put people on the spot. Mark, Liz, you guys have any thoughts?
Well, I would say under land use, that's a really good point, because if you think about emissions that are associated with waste and how this whole group kind of got started, and since I'm a co-chair of the source reduction, I think a lot about landfills and that kind of thing. There's a lot of emissions associated with that. So, you know, I think that's a really good point to think of land use, where the carbon sinks are, the open space, and keeping it open if it is a carbon sink, and, you know, just to be thinking about that kind of thing. So agreed with that.
I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying about landfills, but wouldn't that go under kind of the source reduction working group? I don't know how much we're trying to separate everything.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think there's so much overlap, especially with the sustainability group. But, you know, in our group, we kind of battle, you know, trying to keep us all on task to stay with source reduction and not slip into emissions or water degradation or any of that kind of thing. So there's so much associated with it, but we try and stay away from greenhouse gas issues in source reduction. But, you know, it all kind of plays together. I guess that was my point.
Do you think that, you know, we're the, like, air quotes, sustainability working group, which is a broader topic than source reduction? So maybe in source reduction, they don't talk about greenhouse gas emissions in terms of, you know, waste emissions, for example. Maybe this is the right group for that to be a little bit more broad. I don't know. If we're tackling sustainability, that's a great big word.
Right. That's why our group was tasked to come up with that definition of sustainability.
Right. Yeah. And maybe this group is where all of the other groups tie in, and, you know, the topics that might be out of scope for the other groups are, you know, scoped into this one. There has to be a place for that.
Right. And I think that's a really good point. And, yesterday we also had a conversation about the objective that's around equity and inclusion and environmental justice. And again, that's one that really, if it's working right, it should be a principle that really gets embedded across the board in terms of everything that we're working on through these objectives of all of the partners for a sustainable Nevada.
Right. Yeah, and on that note, it's good to note here that we should, I think somebody said it in the comments too, Elizabeth, I think you did, that we should be looking, and keep an eye on federal agencies for their wider efforts, because we have to play with them too. And I know it's pedantic, but like I said yesterday, I think it's important to be pedantic here.
Right, and I think too, there's a lot of tools and Alexia, I'm sure you're probably using some of them where you work, but there's a lot of tools that the federal agencies have developed for the action portion of, greenhouse gas emissions and measuring and reducing and all of that. So yeah, we need to keep an eye on that. And as part of the communication and education, it's especially in industry, because, I focus a lot on industry. We don't have to reinvent the wheel, but we can educate businesses and organizations on how to use those tools or where to find those tools so that they can start working on their own reductions.
Yeah. And I guess in a way, like I think this is worth sharing. I visualize PSN, and I've said it a couple of times, but as being, again, the bridge, but not just, a website that bridges people, but like actively participating in the community, going, oh, you do this, you're trying to innovate a new technology to create biofuels. Cool. I know, Assemblyman Watt, let me introduce you, please. I guess as the ambassadors between, this is my great big vision. And I think it's important to talk about it because it might help, kind of clarify or define the direction that we take with this website. I think it's important to share that. That's all I'm trying to say.
Good point. All right. Are there, I think the challenge will be coming up with some actionable items here for our menu of options. But I also think that probably our real starting point is trying to bring in some speakers to talk a little bit, just where things are at, where there might be gaps, and where they see PSN being able to provide value. But then also just helping with increasing communication and that education piece. Sam, did you have something you wanted to say?
Yeah, I was just going to say, and maybe this is stupid and we already brought this up at some point, but have we looked at what other similar groups have done in different states? Like maybe some plans that they have in place, or, what's worked to create those bridges and things like that. Has anybody done any research?
That's a
I think
really
the short
nice
answer
point.
is probably yes.
Yeah, I think so. Maybe loosely, right?
And it depends on what end of the state you're talking about. I know, Southern Nevada and Northern Nevada, that the answer is yeah. We've looked at the Arizona, California cities, other cities that are comparable size to Las Vegas. I know Reno was kind of doing the same thing with some of the the mid-sized cities when they were doing their sustainability action plan and sustainability partners in Northern Nevada. So
I guess I'm thinking about like Nevada is pretty divided, right? So we have maybe different challenges than a state like, I don't know, Massachusetts, where people are kind of all like in the same place and, you know, have a similar climate and have, you know, just it's a lot more similar than this north-south divide that we have here. So I was thinking about somewhere like Florida, where I'm from, where literally southern Florida is a different state than northern Florida, even though there isn't that divide there. So has Florida been successful in creating a statewide working group or statewide resources that they can provide to, you know, some of the smaller cities, some of the smaller counties, you know, some of those businesses? Like, have they been able to form anything that's been, that we can use as just like, maybe not a model, but like some, to give us some more ideas? Because I feel like the past couple of minutes, we've all just kind of been staring at the screen, like, what other ideas do we have?
I can speak to that a little bit. So Minnesota has done something pretty remarkable, and that is they've brought together the regulators, if you will, from all of the relevant, you know, agencies in the entire state, and created this sort of panel that if you are an innovator coming into the state to meet their climate action needs, that you will have an audience with everyone that you're going to need to get permission from all at once, and they will work with you. They won't, you know, you don't have to like dig through a phone book from 1990 to find somebody, you know, like they've pulled these people together in like a one-stop shop where you go in as an innovator in a business, you know, with your ideas and the money to back yourself, and they provide you with paperwork, tell you how to fill it out and show you which direction to go. And that all, again, is based on their climate action initiative. So Minnesota is a really, really good example of that. And that's something that I think would be incredibly beneficial to this state, especially as, you know, economy is involved, and specifically economy regarding innovative technology, you know, around climate action. So that would be something that I would love to see, and I would absolutely be a voice for that. And on another sort of note regarding that, there's this sort of membership, if you will, and we see some of that in Nevada. Like Nevada Grown is an organization that if you have a membership, then you get all their swag and insignia, and you can post it up all over your restaurant, and everybody thinks you're cool, you know. But maybe for our group, we can also, and this is an action item for greenhouse gas emissions or for anything, I guess, but create some kind of like membership format where, you know, you sign up to be a member of, you know, PSN, then, you know, it affords you like a seat at the table or something, but it just, you know, helps promote our mission and expands our reach. So those are two things that I have to offer there.
That membership idea, Alexia, is being talked within the chair and co-chair meetings on when we get to the post menu of options release. You know, how's that going to change the structure of this group? And we're outlining kind of different, I don't know, tiers, you know, dependent on if you represent an organization, if you're just a general member of the public. So we are definitely looking at that. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, it's good to know.
Well, all right. So, you know, I mean, what I hear in all of that is kind of a little bit two-pronged. One is just sort of researching and seeing, and maybe that's what our working group can even suggest under this objective, is researching a little bit more what's being done in other states, and also using that as a tool for benchmarking. You know, as Marco said, you know, they've already benchmarked City of Las Vegas against comparable cities in Arizona and California, and I'm sure other places as well. But then also, you know, taking a look at what are other states doing to, you know, develop and attract the kinds of businesses that will help get to where the state wants to be, and are there, processes like Minnesota has that can help fast track those kind of businesses once you've decided the ones that you want to have. So a couple of ideas I hear out of that.
Yeah.
No need to reinvent the wheel when somebody's already come up with some good ideas. All right, any other thoughts that folks want to put on the board before we wrap up the call? All right, well, hearing none, like I said, keep an eye on your email. We'll get something out soon here in terms of kind of working on the wording of the objectives and the different potential draft options for the menu of options, and then we'll be looking for your feedback on that. And if there are any new ideas that you come up with, please send them to us. And the other piece of all of this is that we will try to take, for at least this subgroup, and maybe just the broader sustainability working group, bring in some outside speakers to talk a little bit more just about where the Nevada climate plan is and what's being done and how they potentially see PSN being able to plug in and help advance things.
That's a
Sounds
great
good.
idea.
Excellent. Well, thanks everybody for getting on the call this morning. I appreciate all the good ideas and all the good input.
Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks for facilitating this.
Justin.